Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a tier list video on the books in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. As far as spoilers go, I'm going to be avoiding spoilers as a whole and just talking about general premise, like back of the book, back of the cover kind of things. So basic character, like starting points and my thoughts on the book as a whole without spoiling anything. I'd like to also real quick apologize for any background noise you may hear. I'm home with the family and they're downstairs watching TV, talking, things like that. So if you hear anything from downstairs, ambient noise or whatnot, I'm sorry. Hopefully it's not too distracting, but I'm home with them and not much I can do about it other than record in the middle of the night. So, and when they're asleep. So also, I just wanted to take a real quick moment just to say that I'm sorry this is the second tier list video I made in a row. That wasn't my plan. I do plan on doing kind of a book by book review sort of thing, but tier lists are fun and they're easy and a good way for me to get into making videos, talking for long extended periods of time, getting practice with that. Excuse me. So without further ado, I'm gonna get started. So the first book on the list is Mistborn, Final Empire, which is the first book that in the Mistborn Era 1, the only Mistborn book I've read so far. I finished it last night, and quite frankly, it's fantastic. Probably my favorite book in the entire Cosmere outside the Stormlight archive. I'm a pretty heavy Stormlight archive sucker, so it's going to be hard for anything to beat that for me. We'll see if Mistborn has it in as a whole can do it, but I absolutely love this book. It follows a young street urchin named Vin, a member of a thieving crew, and also a leader from a different thieving crew named Kelsier, and several other characters, but those are the main two. It's quite frankly a great book. I loved it. The character interactions were excellent. The magic system, the world building was amazing. I think without a doubt Brandon's magic systems as a whole are fantastic, and Allomancy is probably my second favorite besides Surge Binding. Again, Stormlight sucker. So yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful world. It's really interesting magic. The characters are great. The plot was solid. It had a very self-contained story that both set up the next book very well. I'm excited to read it. I'll probably start it right after this video. But also had a self-contained story that was concise and finished off quite nicely. So I really liked it. I also liked Ellen, by the way. He was probably the other main character. Kind of gets introduced midway through the book, but Ellen's great. I also just want to mention you talk about him without spoiling anything. I like Ellen a lot as well. So I pretty much like all the main characters. Next are going to be the other Mistborn books, which I haven't read, but I'm excited to do so. So sorry about that. Got Well of Ascension, Hero of Ages, Alloy of Law, Bands of Mourning, or Shadow Self, Bands of Mourning. I do plan to read those relatively soon, as fast as I can. So, next, White Sand, I also haven't read. I believe they're graphic novels and aren't nearly as relevant to the greater scope of the Cosmere. So I don't know if I'm going to read them. I've never really read graphic novels, but I might if I finish Mistborn and nothing new in the Cosmere has come out, and I can't find any other fantasy to read because I want to branch out a little bit more, maybe into Path of Grothless, or if anyone watching this video this far actually feels like commenting, because I didn't get any in the last video, and let me know some book suggestions or anything else you want to discuss, videos you want to see, please let me know. I'd love to have a small little discussions. I doubt even if I do get any comments, there'll be few, so I'll be active. So give it a shot. On to my entrance into the Cosmere, The Way of Kings. I'm going to put it above. Again, I'm going to try and organize these as well within their tiers from my favorite to least favorite in that tier. So, Way of Kings. Way of Kings was my entrance into the Cosmere and holds a special place in my heart. It's also a near perfect setup book for the series. It introduces the characters, Kaladin, Shallan, and Dalinar, the main three characters, beautifully. Kaladin, a depressed and beaten down slave, and it's excellent to see him come into his own in this book a little bit, and I loved his arc. Again, I'm going to try and not spoil anything, so just general stuff like that. So Shallan, she's this timid, sheltered, noble lady who is forced by financial circumstances to go and try and steal from one of the most powerful women in the world. And she has to live this double life where she's both a scholar to the woman, but also trying to burglar her and dealing with that, trying to stay low. And it's also another great arc. Definitely less actiony than the other two, I would say, of Dalinar and Kaladin, and can sometimes drag because of that, especially when you go from like a cliffhangery type or intense moment to a Shallan chapter. But still loved her arc, loved her as a character, especially in this book. Shallan gets, if you watch my last tier list, Shallan gets annoying, but in this book, I don't find her annoying at all. So really great. And then Dalinar is this high prince who has to he's a noble high prince, probably the only noble high prince, and he has to deal with these petty squabbling other high princes that are selfish and self-interested, and he has to deal with them and trying to unite them while also suffering from visions that and potential insanity in his mind. He's unsure if he's going insane or not. So again, fascinating characters, all set up excellently. And the book is dramatic. It's got wonderful character moments, excellent highs, excellent character lows. It's beautiful. And the climax is great. The action is great. It's intense. The interludes are fascinating. Everything about this book was fascinating. On to Words of Radiance. Probably my favorite Cosmere book. It's a little iffy for me with Rhythm of War. Every time I read a new Cosmere book, I think it's like, or a new Stormlight book rather, I think it's the best one. I thought that about Oathbringer, but my opinion definitely changed. So I'm going to wait on saying Rhythm of War is better than Words of Radiance. It's my personal feelings right now, but I don't trust them. So Words of Radiance, on the other hand, has stood the test of time for me. I've reread it multiple times, and I think it's Brandon Sanderson at his best. It wonderfully continues the arc set up in Way of Kings, characters meeting, interacting more. The plot is well more fast-paced, way more action than in Way of Kings. It's again still emotionally driven with the characters, and it's got even better character highs and better lows too. I mean, it's a great continuation, and I love Words of Radiance. Probably my favorite Cosmere book. We'll see how I feel about Rhythm of War over time. But before we get to Rhythm of War, gotta talk about Oathbringer. So again, when I first read Oathbringer, I absolutely loved it, and I still absolutely love it. But I'm gonna put it in A tier because I think it has strikingly more flaws for me than the other books in the Stormlight Archive. I think the biggest one of those for me is pacing rather. It's not necessarily poorly paced, but it can get slow at bits, definitely. Anytime I read a Stormlight book for the first time, I typically read it between 5 days and 2 weeks. And my first time reading Oathbringer, I flew through it like the others. Upon a reread, however, I still flew through Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, and reading those within probably a week each. And Oathbringer took me over a month. It got slow at points. I put it down for several days, which again, I'm not that type of person. I'm definitely a binge reader. I can read, I can sit down for 10 hours and just get lost. But Oathbringer for me was slow. I wouldn't be dying to jump back into it. Some at points I put it down and then could, do I want to read today? I got other things to do. And I think the pacing is the reasoning for that. It got slow. Doesn't mean I don't love the book. I still think it's a good continuation of the arcs. I think the character moments are all still wonderful, good. Again, I keep saying emotional highs and emotional lows, but these books really are character studies as much as they are epic fantasies. And again, Oathbringer has some good character moments and some really powerful, sad character moments. It's definitely an emotional book. And climactic finish, really climactic ending. And everything with Dalinar's flashbacks. If you didn't know that each of these books, each of the Stormlight books has one of a viewpoint character that that we see their flashbacks, kind of their backstory a little bit that we haven't had yet. And Dalinar, everything to do with Dalinar's flashbacks is perfect. I think if you plug, it's definitely the best flashbacks in the entire Stormlight. Definitely better than Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, in my opinion. But the rest of the book is a little bit less engaging. Still a great book. Still loved it. Still set up the next book well. Speaking of the next book, that brings me to with Rhythm of War, which again I absolutely adored. As of right now, I think I enjoyed it more than Words of Radiance. Now, continuing on from Oathbringer, the pacing issue I thought was completely reversed in Rhythm of War. I read Rhythm of War in 5 days. I have now read it twice. Since I got it, I pre-ordered it, so got it November 17th, when it came out, and since then I reread it again and loved it just as much a second time. Read it at just about the same pace. It's an absolute page turner. I think the only complaint for me, again, this is all subjective. You have other complaints, that's fine. But for me, was the flashbacks. Um, excuse me. The flashbacks are definitely not up to the tier of the other three. I think that's what happens when you have the main three characters, Kaladin, Shallan, and Dalinar, kind of getting the first three books, and then jumping to a side character like Venli and Eshonai. Kind of they shared Eshonai. They both shared the flashbacks, but so I think a part of that's just because they're not as central. I also think from listening to what Brandon said that initially all of the Parshendi culture was meant to be revealed through these flashbacks, but by the time we get to Words of Radiance, it was impossible not to include that. So a lot of what that was supposed to be in these flashbacks was already known to us. So that's why the flashbacks, like the first two parts, I believe, don't even have a single flashback. They start in the middle of the book, when they've been in the other books, they've been from the beginning, and they've just been more revealing with some shocking character reveals. And this one was more of just nice, good, solid character moments, but not nearly as impactful, not nearly as compelling. And for me, that does hold back a little bit, but doesn't ruin the book. I still think it really beautifully complements some character arcs. Venli's character arc, for example, I thought was great in this book, in her present arc, and I thought the flashback went hand in hand with it. So I can forgive it. I still enjoyed them. I think they're definitely not to the tier. But as a whole, Rhythm of War, I think, was excellent. We got to see some of the side characters like Venli and others in the spotlight, and it was wonderful to see. I think this book expertly set up the next book. I'm terrified and excited, not terrified, but nervous for what's going to happen and excited to get my hands on it and read it. I can't believe I might have to wait, a couple years, or knowing Brandon no more than 2 years or 3 years, but still a couple years, and that's gonna probably drive me crazy. But I love this book. I can't wait to kind of give it a couple months, start back at Way of Kings, and read all the way through. That's what I did in preparation for Rhythm of War, and I'll probably do it again. I love these books. I don't think I'll get tired of rereading them. So yeah, without further ado, let's go on to the novellas, the Stormlight novellas. So this is Edge Dancer. It follows a side character, Lift, that's introduced in Words of Radiance, and this novella takes place in between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. If you're curious, if you haven't read it, for example, and you're trying to get into the Stormlight archive, I do think you need to read it, or should read it in between these books. Don't kind of like go back at the end and read it, because some of the character motivations in Oathbringer are affected by the events in Edge Dancer. So, but as for Edge Dancer, it follows Lift, which if you watch my character tier list in the last video, which did have spoilers up to Oathbringer, but I'll leave anything like that out. I don't think she's as great as some people say. I like her. I don't dislike her. I put her in, I think, B tier. I really like her, but she's not my favorite. So already this book isn't as grabbing to me as storylines with Kaladin or Dalinar or Shallan at their head. But really, really good, really solid. It's a novella, so it can't really compete with these books. It's hard to compete with a 200-page novella with a 1,200-page epic fantasy novel. So again, it's a little unfair putting them on the same level, but still a good story. Still really liked it and recommend it. It's solid. Lift is entertaining still, and some characters get introduced that actually show up later. So, and it's good. Dawnshard. This novella takes place in between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, and likewise, I think you should read it. It's not nearly as impactful to the Rhythm of War as Edge Dancer was to Oathbringer, but it's very, very impactful to the general Cosmere and has a lot of deep Cosmere type stuff in it, especially near the end. I definitely think you should read this book if you're a Cosmere fan in general. It's a novella, so it's a little bit shorter, a lot of bit shorter. It's hard to compete. I think I read both of these within a day. So again, I'm a fast reader, maybe not a fast reader, but I read for long extended periods of time. So they're very short, but it's still solid stories, good characters. again, it follows different characters. It follows more side-ish characters. A member of Bridge 4, and Risen, who's a recurring interlude character in the first 3 Stormlight books. And it's good. It's a solid, concise story. Not much else to say. It's good. I like it. Warbreaker. I'm gonna put Warbreaker in A tier behind Oathbringer. I really enjoyed Warbreaker. I know it's many people's on the lower end of their Cosmere list. And I guess if I love all of Mistborn and put that all in S tier or A tier, I guess for me it would also be at the bottom half. But I still really love it. It's a really good book, really great characters. I liked Vasher a lot. I liked Vivenna. Thought she was maybe a little bit more bland, but I liked her. Good arc. I liked Ciri. I liked Susabran. Lightsong and Blushweaver were amazing together. I love Lightsong. All the characters were great. The magic system, again, doesn't top Surge Binding or Allomancy, but I absolutely loved it. I'm actually planning on potentially doing a tier list on the magic systems. There's only 4, not counting White Sand, that I can think of here. Maybe if you split some of the in-world difference between magic systems, for example, if I split up Allomancy versus Ferruchemy, I can make more, but it'll be a little bit of a short, quick video. I might do it, I might not. Another tier list, but again, another magic system that I absolutely love. I fear they'd all be like S or A tier, so maybe I won't do that. But a really good magic system. I like the breaths. It's cool. It's innovative, and I don't want to say too much about it in case I do end up making a video like that. So, yeah, the plot's strong, good characters, and I know it's a little bit less to the scale of Stormlight and Mistborn. I've only read one Mistborn book, but I would already say the scale is grander, and I know, again, this arc has 2 more books, and I think the scale's only going to get bigger. So Warbreaker's on a bit of a smaller scale, and I think that doesn't necessarily make it any worse, but it's less impactful to the general Cosmere. So from that angle, again, it's a little bit lower for me. But as a whole, really solid, and I like it a lot. So on to Elantris. I still like Elantris a lot, but I think it has problems. And it was Brandon Sanderson's first published novel, or first published book. And I think it shows a little bit, not meant to insult Brandon or anything, because I think he's a brilliant and amazing writer, but I think it shows that this is his first published book. And I think the main problems for me are twofold. I think, for one, that the character, I'm a big character reader, especially with Brandon's works. I think reading Stormlight Archive first, I was spoiled a bit with amazing character work, and I think Elantris lacked a lot of character work. Some of the characters are really good and interesting, especially a lot of the side characters like Eondel or Serene and her uncle. Pretty much most of the band of rebels that Serene works with. I think they're all good side characters. They remind me of similar to Bridge 4 and Kelsier's Band of Thieves in the first Mistborn book. I think they're all that component of a good group of kind of friends still exists, and I like that. But I think the main characters, with exception of one of the 3 main characters, Hrathen, Serene, and Raoden, I only think one of them has a developed arc. I don't want to mention names for potential spoiler reasons, but one character in particular I thought was extremely flat. I can say the good one, the one that was the pure noble all the way through. It's the same, and I thought that was a little weak. The characters were weaker. I still really liked it. Good, solid story. But the characters were weaker. And I think my second but I thought the magic system was a little bland. It was kind of built up with a lot of mystery around it, and then the reveal didn't hit me. The revelation. It's a little interesting from a Cosmere mechanics, how it all works. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but as a whole, I think the magic as a whole was a little weaker, and for me, it was just less interesting. But I still really liked it. I would still reread it. I loved the premise of the Shayad, I believe that's what it was called, and all the zombie-like state that they were in. I thought that premise was fascinating. Having these people being in a constant state of
their body not progressing. They're kind of frozen in time, so they're constantly feeling hunger, and there's no way to change it, and things like that. I not really spoilers, just basic premise that gets set up very early on. So I found that very fascinating. Probably the best part of the book for me was just kind of living within Elantris, and I thought that again the world building is still pretty decent. Again, for Brandon's probably the best world builder that I've read, maybe behind Tolkien. Which again I haven't read a ton of fantasy, but if I'm saying the only person I can think of off the top of my head better than you is Tolkien, the fantasy god, I think that's pretty high praise. So yeah, the last book is Arkham Unbounded, which is a collection of novellas and short stories and little lore bits within the Cosmere. I should clarify that I haven't read, other than the general world descriptions, which are like basically describes the planets and general basic shard stuff. Again, not really spoilers to the actual books. I haven't read anything from Scadrial. I think that that's all I haven't read within Arkham Unbounded. But for example, Edge Dancer is actually in Arkham Unbounded, so I've read that. I read maybe some of the other like small systems, like the Therondite system, which has like one page of info and like little things like that, or like the White Sand stuff. I didn't read that. I didn't read Mistborn Secret History, which I know is supposed to be really good, but I haven't finished Mistborn, so I don't want to read that yet. Essentially what I did read was, again, all like kind of the planetary descriptions and the Cell stuff. So that Cell is Elantris. So Emperor's Soul, which I actually think was fantastic, probably the best novella I've read in the Cosmere. And also the little Elantris little kind of, it wasn't really a continuation. It was more of a flashback story, that side story that happened during Elantris, with a little like peek in at the after effects, or a little peek at the main characters after the fact. They were kind of like retelling the story, I believe. So most of it was in the story, and then you get a little peek at them in their lives, or something like that. So that was actually really good. If I broke this book up into all its parts, I would put Emperor's Soul probably up here with the other novellas. It's really, really solid. Fascinating new characters, completely new characters, new magic system that we don't see. It still takes place in the same planet and content as Elantris, but has a completely different magic system. And I really like that magic system. I really like the premise of Emperor's Soul. Thought it was really good. But as a whole, Arkham Unbounded, what I have read of it, just hasn't grabbed me. When I look at all these books and think about rereading them, Arkham Unbounded is just kind of like the how do you say that? Silmarillion from Lord of the Rings, from Tolkien's Middle Earth. You know, it's kind of just lore bits, and as much as I do like having those lore bits, again, I definitely recommend reading it. All these books that I've read, but when I look at it from a rereadability and from enjoyment, it was more of just information that I really liked having, but not nearly as interesting outside of Emperor's Soul, I think. And I guess Edge Dancer if you count, but I had read Edge Dancer before. A Hope of Elantris, that's the one I'm thinking of. The continuation of Elantris. I have read that as well. But I didn't read 11th Metal or anything in the Scadrian system. I have it up in front of me because I'm checking for if I read anything else. I read all the Rosharan stuff as well. Didn't read the White Sand stuff because again, it's just not interesting to me. I didn't read Shadows for Silence, which I believe is another short novella that takes place on a different planetary system. So there's things in this book that I haven't read. I read the Rosharan stuff, which is, I think, just Edge Dancer. Bear with me for a second. Sorry, guys. It's still Edge Dancer. And then the last thing is, what's this? And then, a preview of Mistborn. So, yeah. No, I pretty much only read the Elantris stuff. And Emperor's Soul was excellent, so I'm probably not giving this book a fair chance. But it's good lore. I want to read 11th Metal, Secret History. What was the other really decent one that I've heard of? I'm forgetting the name, but the Dusk something. I'm sorry if you've read it, you know, but something with again that takes place on another planet. So I'm excited to read more of it. I will get to it eventually, but I just haven't yet. So that does it for this video, though. So that's in the future, again, I plan on making maybe some more tier lists, maybe on the magic systems. Maybe when I finish Mistborn, I'll do Mistborn characters. I don't know.
Tier lists are fun. They're easy. Let me know in the comments. Again, no one commented in the last video, which again is fine. But if you're inclined to comment down below, give me video ideas, give me discussions. Again, very few people are probably ever going to comment, so I'll be able to be active. So if you have anything you want to say, even if it's just I don't really like your videos or your voice, go ahead and say it. So, but yeah, thanks again for watching. Have a good day.